I have noticed when I kind of slack or don't do anything prehab, those are the times when I have actually thrown my back out. So always try to stay on top of it.
This video's got a special guest, Max. He's training for his NFL Pro Day, and he's someone who's dealt with lower back pain for a very long time. And in this video, I'm going to show you a sneak peek into his prehab and recovery routine. Because as a lot of you guys know, if you have lower back pain, it requires a lot more maintenance than the average person. This includes Max, a high-level athlete. So today we're going to show a little bit about what he does for prehab and recovery for his back specifically. Right, Max?
Yep. So I always start out first with some hip activation, followed by some glute activation, and then I always do some core work before I go, whether it's a cardio running workout or a throwing workout or a lifting workout. I always try to stick to these three things that I feel like really help me keep my back healthy and strong. You know, as someone who's dealt with back pain, I think it's important to stay on top of it, and I've noticed that when I do these exercises, I don't have as much back pain post-workout and just long-term.
We're going to check out what Max does here. There's a couple prehab activities that I thought were kind of unique that you guys would probably find some benefit from.
Just hip. I just get the hips.
So first thing he's doing here is just getting the hips moving, doing some light hip mobility work. And overall, Max said he takes about 10 minutes to do his total prehab routine. And that's someone who takes very good care of his body. So if you're someone who isn't a high-level athlete, it might even take you longer to do some of this stuff. So yeah, next he's doing a little hip stretch for the glutes. How long do you hold this one, Max?
Usually about a minute, I would say. Most of my stretching I hold for a minute to a minute and a half.
And that's on each side.
Just really try to sink in, put all my weight on the front leg.
Do you ever try going over to this leg?
Over here.
Yeah.
Not quite as flexible.
Help get you there.
Yeah, and then the last hip stretch I do is right here. Kind of put this leg at 90, this leg over, and then I just reach around. It stretches out the hips, feel it in the glute a little bit, but also kind of get that spinal rotation going, so you get your back warmed up a little bit too.
Yeah, this one looks like a pretzel in both angles.
Yeah.
So you can see what's going on here. He's really stretching the whole outer glute, as well as getting a little bit of mobility and rotation in the back. So this is kind of a good two-in-one to do. And it's always nice to stretch two muscles, especially the lower back on one side and the glute on the other, because that's actually functional. Usually when you have one side of the glute working, you have the other side of the lower back working to help keep you upright and strong, and especially Max, who's throwing, he wants a strong foundational core, so good to do that as well.
And then I go into some glute activation. Pretty simple glute bridges, so just up, get a good stick at the top, down, always controlling the movement. And so I go double leg, and then I'll switch and go single leg, both legs.
So he's saying as he starts with the double leg, he'll hold it at the top a little bit to make sure those glutes are actually activated and firing, and then he'll switch to single leg. You guys know the importance of glute activation if you watch this channel.
About probably 3 sets of 10 for each, so it's pretty quick. Just go back and forth, and then 3 sets of that.
All right, so 3 sets of 10
And
on
then
each leg.
The final part of my prehab is just core activation. So I start with pelvic tilts, and pelvic tilts, you basically are just driving your core into the ground. Sometimes I put a little extra pressure on my heels. I found that just kind of helps drive the core even further down into the ground. And here too, I like to get a good stick, a good hold, really feel the core getting tight, and then releasing. And I'll do probably anywhere from 10 to 15 reps. It's kind of just a feel thing for me. But yeah, I would focus first on maybe 10 to 15 reps. And I'll hold this for maybe like 30 seconds. It's just reinforcing the core getting tight, lower back getting driven to the ground.
Wow. So that's 6 whole exercises we've talked about for just prehab alone. And Max, what do you find happens if you don't do this stuff?
I just don't feel like I'm ready to work out, and I have noticed when I kind of slack or don't do anything prehab, those are the times when I have actually thrown my back out. So always try to stay on top of it. And then the last one for the core activation is just dead bugs, alternating dead bugs.
You haven't talked about the dead bugs on this channel, but this is an awesome core activation exercise and just getting coordination in the core. Very functional. Your core is going to be working the whole time here. It might look simple, but if you do it slow, controlled, like how he's doing, it's phenomenal. Try it out. And that's 7 exercises, so 7 full exercises for prehab alone. But that's not all. There's more for recovery as well. Now we're going to talk about that.
I always start with the claw. It's one of my favorite tools. I found that just laying on it before doing my recovery stuff is kind of opens me up. I feel like I just feel lengthier and longer, so I always like to do it before stretching. So I'd lay on the claw for a little bit, kind of move around my body to hit different points, and then I get into some stretching.
You heard that? Max was actually one of the first users of the claw. My first promoters.
And this is a hurdle stretch. It kind of opens your hip up, but also just a good hamstring stretch for the lower back. So I hold these stretches I try to shoot for a minute and a half, but sometimes like a minute.
A minute and a half, and that's on each side?
Yep, each side.
And how long would you say your recovery routine takes in total?
Probably about another 10 minutes. So between the prehab and then the recovery, 10 minutes each, I would say.
And what would you say the main goal of your recovery is? Are you trying to gain mobility, are you trying to reduce soreness, or just alleviate pain altogether?
Yep, all 3 of those. From there, just go into a groin stretch, opening up the groin, the hips.
So do you target specific muscle groups when you're stretching? Like, do you pay attention to, I'm going to do the hamstrings first, glutes second, groin?
I kind of just move down, usually start with the hamstrings, then kind of just move the hurdle stretch. You have one leg in, and then the other leg in, so then I finish it up with both legs in for the groin stretch. Just kind of move down like that. And then after that, it's kind of a variation of what I did prehab, but this time the legs straight out, and I actually hug this leg that's up, and I found you get a really good stretch in the glute and kind of into the lower back. And so I'll do this with both legs as well.
One thing that's really big with lower back health and pain relief is making sure your glutes aren't stiff and tight. So if you have noticed the trend here, Max pays a lot of attention to the glutes, making sure they're working properly and they're loose and functional. So it's pretty cool to see that as well.
My favorite stretches are just right here, just laying on the back, pulling the knee to the chest.
Max is saying this is one of his favorite stretches, just pulling the knee to the chest there. How does it feel?
So good.
It feels so good.
I always try to keep the core engaged to the ground while doing this, and then still getting a really good stretch through the glute.
Yeah, so you're keeping the back completely flat on the ground, getting a nice stretch in the whole glute, because the glute has a couple different angles that you like to hit. It seems like he's hitting the upper, kind of like upper hamstring and lower glute there as well. Really stretching out the whole body. That's a nice move.
A little tip that I always try to remember when I'm stretching is I always like to keep you see how my ankle is tight and my toes are pulled back? I always like to keep my other limbs activated. So right here I got my ankle activated, which activates your calf and other muscles. I always like to keep stuff activated. I don't like to just let it go limp. So that's just a little tip that I always try to remember. The double leg. I don't do this one as long. It's kind of a final stretch.
In case you ever need to give birth. Yeah, so that was 6, 7 stretches for recovery alone. Yeah, and for the recovery side, what do you notice anything that happens if you miss out on that for a day?
I just feel like the rest of the day, kind of. I don't feel as good. Feel stiff, tight. So I always feel like when you can stretch and do some recovery stuff afterwards, it always you'll feel it later in the day, but I think you feel it the most too the next day. So if you work out a lot, I think it really helps you be ready for the workout the next day.
Now you heard that. If you want to stay fresh, you want to stay back pain free, try these moves out. And root for Max. He's doing his NFL Pro Day here in a couple weeks, and might be the next Tom Brady. You never know. Thanks for joining, Max.
Yep, thanks for having me.